Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're analyzing a conflict that has really defined the 21st century economy.
But it's one you probably won't find on any major news channel.
Exactly. We're talking about this silent multi-trillion-dollar compute world war.
And this deep dive is focused squarely on the front lines of that war. We're looking at the just intense rivalry between Nvidia and Google.
And that recent $20 billion strategic move that basically redrew the entire map of global AI power.
It really did.
So our mission today is to give you the shortcut. We're going to uncover this bizarre 100-year connection between, believe it or not, theoretical physics and the chips that power ChatGPT.
And we'll get into the monumental strategic blunders made by, two of the world's most powerful companies.
Right, and explain why in this new era of agentic AI, the value of instant speed has gone, well, quite literally infinite.
To really understand why we're fighting over these little bits of silicon, we have to start almost a century before Silicon Valley was even a thing.
Where are we going?
The year is 1925. We're on Helgoland Island in the North Sea.
Okay, so picture this. There's a 23-year-old physicist named Werner Heisenberg. He's fled the mainland because his hay fever is so severe.
I mean, it's described as his face being swollen like a loaf of bread. Just awful.
So he's there to recover, but he's also struggling with this monumental physics problem.
Right. Classical physics was completely failing him. When he tried to describe the movements inside an atom, electrons didn't act like tiny billiard balls.
They were more like ghosts.
Exactly. You just couldn't visualize their physical path, and that was, the bedrock of physics at the time.
So he reaches this point of, intellectual despair. He figures, since he can't see the path, the only thing he can trust are the actual results of his observations.
Which led to this intellectually radical decision. He just abandoned the demand to understand the physical process.
And decided only to calculate the outcome.
He essentially invented a multiplication table. We now call it matrix algebra. But the core rule was completely counterintuitive.
A times B does not equal B times A.
Right. It was a bizarre new language for the universe.
And what's so fascinating is that this matrix math, it acted as a perfect black box.
You didn't need to understand how the electron moved. You just put the inputs into the matrix.
And it spits out where the electron was most likely to appear next. He created matrix mechanics, the foundation of quantum physics.
Okay, so fast forward 90 years. AI researchers realized that this exact mathematical structure, Heisenberg's matrix algebra, is the perfect way to model the brain.
The trillions of fuzzy neural connections in our heads.
Precisely. We still don't understand the soul of intelligence, but we can use these calculations to mimic it with incredible accuracy. And scaling up that calculation is what kicked off this whole compute world war.
So the math was there from 1925, but who was the first person to realize, hey, this needs specialized hardware?
That brings us to 1993 and the founding of Nvidia, led by, of course, Jensen Huang.
The guy in the leather jacket.
The very one. And his company was built on this philosophy of crisis. He famously said, "We are 30 days from ruin."
And that fear fueled a colossal gamble in 2006.
A huge one. He decided to transform the graphics processing unit, the GPU, which was, a chip for drawing triangles in video games, into a universal supercomputer.
Okay, wait, what does that actually mean? Is CDA the hardware, the chip itself, or is it the software?
It's the whole ecosystem. CUDA is the software layer that lets developers use the GPU's massive parallelism for anything.
Right, so a CPU has a few powerful cores for doing things one after another.
But a GPU has thousands of smaller cores, perfect for doing thousands of simple calculations all at once, like matrix multiplication.
And Huang bet hundreds of millions that developers would want that power for, general computing.
A bet that nearly bankrupted them. The stock plummeted 80%.
Shareholders must have been furious.
Well, they were. They thought nobody would ever buy an expensive graphics card just to solve math problems. But Huang held firm. He was just waiting.
Waiting for the shift that would prove him right.
And that shift came not from gaming, but from Google. Around 2013, the legendary engineer Jeff Dean ran the numbers.
And the conclusion was terrifying.
It was. If every Android user used voice search for just 3 minutes a day, Google would have to double its data center capacity.
Which is impossible. I mean, you'd overwhelm local power grids, you'd need hundreds of billions in capital. It would mean they'd have to stop innovating.
They faced an existential compute crisis, and that sparked this internal war to build radically more efficient hardware.
And this crisis really defined the new battleground, what you call the inference flip.
Right. For years, the big money was in training building the massive AI brain. That's Nvidia's turf.
But by late 2025, the global revenue from inference, which is running that brain for real-time interactions, surpassed training revenue.
The market flipped from creating the brain to using the brain.
And that exposed Nvidia's primary vulnerability.
Latency.
Delay. If you're building a self-driving car or a trading bot, you need it to act instantly. Delay equals failure.
And that time it takes to get a response, latency, it became the single most critical factor.
So that brings us back to Google, who are desperate for a solution. In some chaotic conference room, an engineer named Jonathan Ross proposes something radical.
Completely radical. He says, look, the GPU has 99% overhead for graphics. Let's just cut everything out.
And build a silly chip designed only to do Heisenberg's matrix math.
And that was the birth of the Tensor Processing Unit, or TPU.
The core innovation was the pulse array architecture. You can think of it like this. A GPU is like 1,000 students constantly running to a library, the memory to get data.
Right. It's inefficient. But the TPU's pulse array is like all the students standing in a massive square holding hands.
Data just flows through them like blood. They're constantly passing information, calculating, without ever leaving their spot to go to external memory.
And the results were revolutionary. For matrix math, it was 15 to 30 times faster.
And 80 times more energy efficient than the GPUs of the time.
And Google kept this a complete secret. They hid these custom chips away in their data centers.
Until the big public reveal in 2016.
The AlphaGo moment. DeepMind used these secret TPU clusters to power AlphaGo's stunning victory over the human Go champion.
And the CEO announces it ran on their custom TPUs. I imagine Nvidia felt a chill.
A deep one. Jensen Huang, who counted Google as a massive customer, suddenly realized his own customer was building a superior custom alternative.
But the irony here is just incredible because Google, in its moment of overconfidence, made a fatal strategic blunder in 2017.
They did. They published the paper, Attention is All You Need,
which revealed the transformer architecture, the literal blueprint for every modern large language model.
They gave away the keys to the kingdom. The paper basically proved that this attention mechanism, which gives the AI a god's eye view of all its data, just required massive parallel processing.
So it didn't need Google's secretive TPU brilliance.
No. It just needed any chip with massive parallel power.
And who was selling the best massive parallel processor on the market?
The guy in the leather jacket.
Exactly.
Rivals immediately took Google's own formula. The revenge iron triangle formed. Microsoft had the money, OpenAI had the algorithms,
and Nvidia had the GPUs. They used Google's own map to start conquering the world.
Fast forward to November 2022. The ChatGPT tsunami hits. Trained on Nvidia GPUs using Google's formula, and Nvidia stock goes vertical.
Which created the infamous Nvidia tax.
And that tax was just staggering. An H100 card, which costs maybe $3,000 to make, was selling for $30,000.
Or even $50,000 on the black market. That's a 1,000% gross margin.
Companies were literally lining up to pay Huang protection money just to get into the AI future.
But is that sustainable? If the tax is that high, doesn't that just force everyone to build their own chips? Which is exactly what Google was doing.
An invitation to revolt, yes. But building a chip ecosystem is brutally hard. Still, Google felt profound shame.
They invented the formula.
They invented it, but their internal arrogance keeping the TPU proprietary instead of building an open ecosystem like CUDA, it cost them the market lead.
The frustration must have been palpable. The sources even mentioned Jonathan Ross, the TPU's own creator, leaving in despair. He reportedly called Google a beggar sitting on a gold mine.
That's a powerful line.
Was his frustration purely about business strategy, or was there deep internal politics involved in keeping the tech locked down?
It was a combination, but fundamentally it was a lack of vision. Google saw the TPU as an internal cost saver. Nvidia saw CUA as the foundation of a new economic era.
But even for Nvidia, there was this critical physical limit looming.
The memory wall.
The memory wall. It's where the compute speed just outpaces the ability to feed it data. Can you explain that for us?
Sure. So GPUs rely on high bandwidth memory, or HBM, which is external to the main chip. Think of the processor as the fast students, but the library, the memory, is across a busy street.
So the data has to make a round trip.
Exactly. And that journey introduces latency, the delay and jitter, which is unpredictable processing times, like waiting for a traffic jam to clear.
And if you're building an agentic AI that needs to feel instantaneous, if that conversational delay is over 200 milliseconds, you fail.
You fail the speed threshold, and Nvidia was struggling to meet that consistently. Which brings us to the ultimate strategic masterstroke of late 2025.
The return of the architect.
Jonathan Ross, the original TPU creator, founded a new company, Grok, dedicated specifically to solving that memory wall problem for high-speed inference.
So what was his new invention?
The Language Processing Unit, or LPU. It was radical. He solved the memory wall by putting the fastest type of memory, static RAM or SRAM, directly onto the chip.
So if the external HBM is a library across the strait,
SRAM on the ship is having all the books stacked right on the student's desk.
no travel time.
Precisely.
Oh.
This gave Grok incredible bandwidth, over 80 terabytes per second, 10 times higher than HBM. And crucially, the access time was instantaneous.
It created what you call deterministic execution, zero jitter. You always know exactly how long the calculation will take.
Which made Grok the single most potent architectural rival for inference. But there was a drawback.
Capacity. SRAM takes up more space, so a single Grok chip held very little memory.
Only 230 megabytes compared to the 80 or 141 gigabytes on an H100. You needed huge clusters of them to run a large model.
But for high-value, real-time stuff, that speed was everything.
It was. So in December 2025, Nvidia made its move. They announced a $20 billion deal to license Grok's IP and conduct a reverse acqui-hire of Ross and 80% of his engineering team.
$20 billion for speed insurance. It was a defensive masterstroke. They paid a massive premium to neutralize the biggest threat to their dominance.
And acquire the exact tech they needed for future agentic AI.
And the structure of the deal was clever.
Very. Licensing the IP and hiring the talent rather than a full merger. It was a tactical move designed to bypass immediate antitrust review. Nvidia basically bought the time and the talent to control the entire AI lifecycle.
But meanwhile, Google wasn't just sitting idle. The Bard debacle in 2023 had cost them $100 billion in market value in a single day.
That was the moment. CEO Sundar Pichai initiated Code Red.
And the sleeping giant woke up.
It really did. Co-founder Sergey Brin came back to write code. The two warring AI departments, Google Brain and DeepMind, were brutally merged.
Brutally. I mean, was this a calm consolidation or was it a genuine bloodbath? Those teams had been rivals for so long.
The sources say it was brutal. These were two titans with deeply ingrained cultures. The only thing that could force them together was an existential crisis, driven by, frankly, humiliation. They needed one unified strategy.
And Google's counterweapons are physical. They're tackling latency at the cluster level.
Right. While Nvidia uses copper wires to connect its data centers, Google's newest TPU clusters use optical switching. Data travels as light through micromirrors.
No heat, no electrical resistance, less latency across the entire data center.
And they solved the power crisis with the SMR bet. They invested in 7 small, modular nuclear reactors.
To create independent, clean nuclear energy for their data centers.
And this isn't just PR. It's a strategic counterpunch. They're no longer relying on fragile city power grids. They get guaranteed, independent, and near-free energy.
Which allows them to drive inference costs down towards zero, something no competitor relying on market rate power can match.
And that combination is what finally got Wall Street's attention. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway invested heavily in Google in mid-2025.
They saw it not as a tech company,
but as a nuclear-powered printing press.
And Google's Gemini 3 models, paired with their ability to offer near-free inference, is the ultimate cost attack. Even Apple is using Google's models for their base applications.
It's a huge challenge to the Nvidia empire.
So what we have now are two distinct empires. Nvidia rules, training the lucrative creation of models, and is now buying the latency crown with Grok.
While Google, backed by its own custom chips and nuclear power, is dominating inference, the real-time, low-cost usage of AI and driving processing costs towards zero.
And it all circles back to Heisenberg on that island.
It does. We've abandoned the philosophical demand to understand the soul of intelligence, and we've settled for the ability to predict its outcome through sheer calculation.
We traded logic for probability and consciousness for compute power.
The sources outline a dual empire, but you're right, this battle is far from over. There's a third player often overlooked in this two-way fight. Lisa Su at AMD.
Right. She managed to resurrect AMD from, well, near death.
And her strategy, using what the sources call scissors in calculus, is all about focusing on high-capacity memory and the interconnects. She's targeting that memory wall right between NVIDIA's speed and Google's scale.
Her moves are less dramatic, but they aim to squeeze performance out of that middle ground.
Which could change the trajectory of this compute war all over again, something for you to mull over.